Great.
Okay. So my presentation is about the question, does intensive guidance counseling reduce social inequality in higher education? And I will show you some experimental evidence from Germany. And this study is conducted by two teams, one team from the University of Cologne and one team from the WZB in Berlin. And Professor Melinda Jacob, Irena Pietrzyk, and Juliana Schneider from Cologne, and Professor Marcel Halbig and myself, we are working in Berlin. So first of all, I would like... Oh, how I get there? Oh, okay. So first of all, I would like to tell you something about our motivation. So enrollment at university is socially selective and still low in Germany. This graph shows you the last 15 cohorts of students with university qualification and the differences between the transition rate to higher education between groups of students with non-academic background and students with academic background. So the blue line is are students where parents have a university degree, and for instance, the violet line, so on the bottom is there are students with parents with without any vocational training. So as you can see, over the last 15 years, the differences between the transition rate of students with university qualification are around 20%, and it's really stable over the years. Right now, so it's a more recent cohort, the differences, and also if you want to look at it in a different way, the differences between the students with academic background and from non-academic background of the cohort of 2015 are around 10%. And even if you compare students with the same grade, there are still differences between these groups according to the transition rate to higher education. So this was our motivation, but not only our motivation. Due to this fact, the German states implemented a lot of different programs to foster the transition rate of students with, from non-academic background to the higher education. And these programs partially founded by the states, but also by foundations, like private foundations. So, but we don't know if these programs are working. And one of our tasks is to evaluate one of these programs in our project. So, yes.
So you said this motivation, but what my question is here that do we have any so-called benchmark? So why do we expect that say we would like to see some leveling up among say families, and depending on whether they are higher school attained, and then they should say not necessarily go to university or something like that. So, and that's why it would be interesting to see that do you have any international comparison in this respect, and that's how you are comparing Germany to others, or this is just a German, say, objective in itself?
So compared to international, the Germans have a lower transition rate to, or a lower rate of academics in the whole society. I don't know the number at the moment. I don't bring everything. And also, it is a goal because the earnings of person with an academic degree is still higher. Not in every region, so not in every occupation, but in average, you earn more when you have an academic degree in Germany. So this is the reason why why the state and also we are motivated to foster students to go to university and do a university degree. Did I answer your question? Yeah, okay. So because of these many programs in the last year, the demand of research on the impact of these programs increased, not only in Germany, it's also internationally, and especially for the European context and for the German context, the state of research on extensive guidance counseling is very scarce. So as we look, if we look at the current research and results on different programs, so we can divide the programs in information programs. It's really short programs. So for instance, there are only one information day at school, or only 2 hours to have an information workshop. And we can also, we can divide the programs in short information programs, and also in intensive counseling programs, so that you have a counselor who give you counseling over many years, maybe, for instance. So if we look at this research, we notice that there are not a lot of studies internationally. There are not. We have only 2 studies from Germany, and these 2 studies are from the same project, so they use the same data. And these studies are only about information workshops. We know from the international research that intensive counseling programs are really promising. So we have high effects, but most of them are from America or the USA. And we would say we can't really compare the educational system from the USA to the German system, because we have a really early tracking in our schools. So the students with university qualification, these students are already a select groups. For instance, the cost for education in higher education, the cost of higher education are really, compared to the US cost, really low. Yeah.
As far as I know, the entrance requirements to German universities is very low, is it? So if anybody wants to go to a university, basically with very low costs, she or he can enter. It's unlike in Hungary or in very many European countries where you have a very high entrance cost, not only in monetary, but you have to pass an exam and things like this.
Exactly. It depends on which subject you choose, which study program. If you want to study medicine, you have this so-called numerus clausus. So you have to have a grade of the best grade. So you can enter the university through other ways, but the most students have to pass this, that they have this best grades. If you want to study medicine, if you want to study law, also psychology is really we call it high numerus clausus. So, but the cost to study, they are really low. Yeah.
My question, so basically, but it means that, or are you going to have a slide on what are the reasons behind why you think that lower status students are less likely to apply? Because it's basically the application and not the enrollment that is that matters, right? Because anybody applies can get into the university quite easily.
Yeah, this is one assumption, that the application matters. But there are a lot of research on like rational choice assumptions. So the knowledge about the costs and the benefits of higher education isn't there. So this is the reason why they implemented so many information workshops, and it's also what these studies looked at. So they found some positive effects of this information workshop, but only for a little subgroup. And it's a subgroup that students with already high study intention. For them, the information workshop helps and works, but not for others. So, yeah. So it might be one assumption, might be that the knowledge, they have little knowledge about the higher education system, also about how to apply. Yes, because of that, so we don't have really a lot of research on this topic. This is also a motivation for us to look at it a little bit more in detail. And one of the programs I showed you before is a program in North Rhine-Westphalia. It's a intensive long-term counseling program for high school students. There is a question, so I will stop.
Sorry, just one more question about the admission scheme. So as I understand, in Germany and also in France, now more and more programs are admitting students through this central clearing. So actually, Dorothea Kubler and her colleagues, they have a new paper on that. And so I'm just wondering, what is the percentage of the students entering higher education through this central clearinghouse? And how many are entering in a decentralized way?
I'm not sure, because I think only the medicine students have to, and psychologists. So not all the students have to go to this central.
Not all, but so my understanding.
I don't know. I don't know the number. I'm so sorry. I don't
no
know
problem.
the
Okay.
But this is mostly for the study programs like medicine, psychologists. So they have already this high numerus clausus.
Okay, thanks.
So just some more details about this talent scouting program in North Rhine-Westphalia. North Rhine-Westphalia is one of the biggest federal states in Germany. And so it's an intensive long-term counseling program for high school students. It starts in the 10th or 11th grade, so 2 or 3 years before they graduate. The program itself, it's conducted in grammar school, comprehensive schools, and also vocational colleges. These are schools where you can already get a vocational education training, or like a specialization in one of these vocational education trainings. And they have some tracks which you can also get in university qualification. So there's a little number of students in these schools, they do the academic track, and the others, the most of them, they don't do the academic track. And the program are conducted by over 70 talent scoutings from 17 universities at over 400 schools in North Rhine-Westphalia. The program starts with a one-by-one consultation, and they have, with an open-end counseling session. So they don't really force them to go to university. They just start to talk about their future, about their plans, their occupational dreams, and they add also events with other talents, so-called talents in this program. They visiting the universities, like workshops, networking, and open days at the universities. So the program is not standardized, and the communication between the scouts and the students are not every time formal. So they also communicate through WhatsApp. So the relationship between students and talent scouts is more like like to the big brother or big sister. Yeah, it's what they told us. So this is how the relationship is between students and talent scouts. So the focus group of the program itself are students with non-academic background, and the main goal is reduce social inequality in the realization of educational aspiration. It's not only to go to university, and also improve other factors which that are important for educational success. So yeah.
If it's non-standardized, how does the program actually, differentiate between, how would I put it more correctly? So if there's a scout and goes there, how do you make sure that it actually addresses the really those who you want them to address, so the non-high status students, and not go for the talented, which are correlated with the
So the person who are in charge for the program, they talk to the teacher, and they try to explain it, which students are the focus group. So they really, and if they notice that they got a lot of students because they have like an open, they called it open door policy. So the talents go to the school, have a room, and the door is just open, and the teachers invite students to go to this counseling. So, and if they notice, they just get students who are already would study because they are from academic background, they would give a feedback to the teacher, this is not the student we are addressing, or yeah. So they, they try to adjust the process if they think that's are not the students, the right students, or not the students they want to have in the program. So, and the TUWAP study, it's a future and career plans before high school graduation. In German, it's Zukunfts- und Berufspläne vor dem Abitur. Evaluates this program. It's founded by the Ministry of Culture and Science of North Rhine-Westphalia because they also finance this program, the whole program. And the duration of the project is about 8 years. So we started in 2016. We got financial support for 4 years, and then we got an extension. Luckily, we were really lucky to have this extension. I also tell you afterwards why why it was really a great idea to give us this extension. And as I told you before, it's a cooperation between the University of Cologne and the WZB. So the main goal of the project is to evaluate the talent scouting program, but we also do some research on post-secondary pathway of high school students. So we have also other questions like gender questions, or we focus on students with a migration background and look a little bit if there's anything different. And yeah, we know already that they behave a little bit different or decide differently. But our main research questions are, does the program enhance the transition rate into higher education for persons with different academic background? And the second question is, does the program reduce inequality in transition to higher education? It's good to know if program has an effect, but we also want to know if the program really reduces inequality. So to answer our question, we have several sub-studies. So we have the first study is just to establish the efficacy of the intervention. It's what I will present today, so the RCT. We are just preparing some publications. Then the second sub-study is about determining the selection into the program. So we also looked at the teachers, how they would decide which students should be invited to the program and which not. And we, it's almost published the paper about this. And we also looked at the students, how they behave, which students go to the program. We looked at the compliance in our RCT and tried to figure out which factors determine the participation of the students. And we also tried to do some methodological contribution. In the 2 first years of the study, we didn't have any data, so we had to figure out how to use our knowledge to contribute something. And we published an article where we discussed what is necessary to answer the question whether a program really reduces social inequality. And we discussed the importance of participation rate, so that you also have to look at the participation rate of different subgroups, like students with and non-academic background, and also to calculate the average treatment effects for these subgroup to really answer the question, because we looked at the current research and we noticed that a lot of studies just focus on one group and they miss the information about the other group. So you can't really answer the question that the program reduces inequality, as I will show you later on. So, but today I just focus on this first sub-study. And if you want to know about something more about the other studies, I'm happy to discuss it with you later or tell you something about it later. So our research design for the RCT was the first, or I will show you at first the survey design. So we had a baseline measurement at the beginning of 2018, just after the program started. Then we have a second survey in a school context, so the students were still in the school. After this, there was the first possibility to transfer to higher education for the students. And then we had 2 more ways, so a half year after the high school graduation and 1.5 years after high school graduation. And I will just follow this this timeline to show you the results, and also a little bit more. I will give you a little bit more detail on the RCT itself. So the baseline measurement, just to show you some numbers, how our sample, or which characteristics our sample had. So we had a little bit more female persons, so the males are with 42%, but that isn't surprising us, because in Germany, because of the really early selection, you already lose some male students. So at this stage of the educational pathway, we already know there are more females. And so the sample just shows this also. Then we had a little bit less than a half with migration background. We also see that in the overall sample, we have more students from academic background. This is also what we know already. We only looked at, or we only have schools, gymnasium, so we have only the academic track schools and the Gesamtschule comprehensive schools in our sample. We didn't looked at schools with this vocational training colleges. And so we have a little bit more schools like a really total academic track schools. The average age is about almost 17 years. So the initial grades are, I don't know if this is a mean of every schools in North Rhine-Westphalia, but we have these grades from 0 to 15. The intention to study is something between. So a high intention is 5. So it's because we have these academic track schools in our sample, and it's a little bit higher than the mean, and the intention for vocational education training is lower than to go to universities. It's how we expected. For the RCT, we didn't use all the schools because the university didn't have so many resources. So we had to skip some schools because they told us they can't really go to so many schools we observed. So we focused a little bit more in our RCT on the focus group. So you can see here the number of persons with academic background is lower than in the overall sample. And this is what we intended to have. So it's only really differences in the sample. Yeah. So just to tell you something about the RCT itself. So it's a multi-site RCT. We randomized within the schools. We had 30 schools. I think there were 9 comprehensive schools and the other ones were gymnasium. We randomized on the individual level. We planned to randomize between schools, but we couldn't get so many schools. I think our power analysis said that we need about 60 schools. And we had 40, so we just decided that we will randomize on the individual level. We have parallel design with only 2 conditions, so with the treatment and without any treatment. So the 2 conditions, 50 by 50, oh, sorry, that wasn't intended, a 50 by 50 allocation rate, and we had this educational background as blocking variable.
Do you worry about the spillover effect, or are you going to do anything with it?
We are worried about it, and I will tell you later on something about it. Yeah. So we had also eligibility criteria. So it was an educational background because of the focus group. So we prioritized students with without college-educated parents. And as I told you before, the location was in North Rhine-Westphalia. We also registered our study. Yeah, pre-registered. So just to show you our balancing table. So after an external researcher conducts the randomization, because we were the grade is the number of class.
The grade, what does it mean, grade?
This is like it's
Gymnasium.
It's a mean overall grade.
It's the class marks, right?
Yeah, it's class marks.
Yeah.
Yeah, also. Yeah. The higher than better. Yeah, and 0 is 0 to 15 was the scale.
Another qualification question. In your previous slide, you had academic background. What does it mean?
That at least one parent has an university degree. Without academic background, so none of the parents have an academic degree, and with academic background, at least one of the parents has an academic degree. And there's also a second question. I think it's.
This is really interesting that this program is supposed to put priority on kids without an academic background, yet in your sample, 48% of the kids have an academic background. So what is the incentive mechanism for the tutors or however you call them?
So in the program, there are not so many students with academic background, But for our study, we took a little bit more students in the sample. So we prioritize students with non-academic background, and then if we had some places left, we put also students with academic background in the program. So we filled up the group of talents with students with academic background. Yeah, and because they had so many places, we have also a little bit more students with academic background. But in like when they in the practice, like in the real field, they don't have so many. But for the study, it was really important for us to also have students with academic background, because they also have students with academic background in the program.
So basically you want to have a sample which is large enough for
Exactly.
study heterogeneity of the effects between these different groups.
Yeah. It was also really hard to discuss it with the university that we want to have students with academic background, because they told us, but that's not the focus group. And we told them, please, but only for this study, could you treat them also?
And in just coming back to the previous question, in the real world, in the actual implementation of the program, do these mentors or whoever you call them, do they have an incentive mechanism whereby they are incentivized to specifically get the non-academic students?
First of all, they tried through the teachers, and the teachers know the background of the students, because the talent scouts know them after they discussed it. And when a student, they told us, when the students come into the room with academic background, they don't get the same information at the same time like the other students. They don't say, yeah, you should leave, you are not the right person here in this room. It's more than, yeah, you can also look to the university at the website. There are some information, you find there the information, and that's it. And they care a little bit more about the students from non-academic background. So it's how they try to solve the problem. Any more questions? So as you can see at the balancing table, the randomization worked out. So there are some differences in the marks. But we don't think they are so large that we have to worry about it. So I think it's a nice balancing table. So just come back to the main question: does the program enhance the transition rate into higher education for persons with different academic background? For our analysis, we use an intention to treat analysis strategy. We also calculated an IV estimation just to see what's happening and to compare them. But we think the intention to treat analysis is the most suitable strategy for our purpose. We just used really a small number of variables. We used the schools or school fixed effects for every calculation because to just control for the differences in the schools. And for some models, we also control for the initial outcomes, so for the initial study intention, for instance. We calculated everything with standard errors, and here are the samples for the 3 waves we already have. So the samples are every time around 1,000 students. In the second wave, a little bit more than 1,000. We have a really low number of missings, but it's due to the fact that we have a little number of variables. And so we decided to don't impute any data. But yeah, we can discuss it later on if you think we should impute. So let's go to the results. So for the results of the second wave, so that was still in the schools. We do not have any information about the transition rate. So we looked at the intention, intention to study, and we calculated models for all, so overall effect, and separately for students with and without academic background. And for the study intention in the schools, the treatment, it was like a half year after this treatment started, half to 9 months after the treatment started. We see a little rise in the intention to study, but it wasn't significant. So we wouldn't say that there's an effect. When we looked separately for the both groups, we also don't see any effect. So the bar is a little bit higher for the person with academic background, but yeah, it's still not significant. So at this moment, we wouldn't say there's any effect. We also looked at other outcomes. The only dependent variable which showed the effect was that they feel a little bit more informed about the higher education system. But we also looked at like rational choice components and something like this. Yeah. So then in the a half year after this, the graduation, we collected data. And here we had the information about the enrollment. And as you can see, the result was really, yeah, it was quite shocking for us, but more for the ministry. So there was no effect, overall effect. So, and then we also looked for the both groups, and we saw that if you want to see any effect, then for the person with non-academic background, it was a negative effect, and person with academic background was more positive effect. But at this stage, we said, yeah, it's not significant. So, but it was really hard at this time to also inform the ministry about these results, because it was at the end of the first period of our financing period. So it was really hard to ask for more time, but we were assuming that we need more time. And we were right, because when we look at the data 1.5 years after the high school graduation, the overall effect is still nothing. So there's no effect. But if we look at the two groups, 1.5 years after graduation, we see an effect for students from non-academic background, a positive effect around 8 percentage point. And for students with academic background, a negative, it's around 5-something percentage, but it's not significant.
two questions are related. Do you worry about the differential attrition of the treated versus non-treated and the academic versus non-academic background students? So now you're in the third period, right?
Yeah.
And there was some attrition, not much, but
There's no difference. There's
there's
no
nothing.
bias. No,
Okay.
we are really lucky. I might have also a slide for this, but there's no bias.
You have a higher number of observation here than in the previous.
I have a
So it's
higher-
1,056 and previously it was 999.
Yeah, because I just used the data from every wave. So it's not a panel, but we also calculated everything with like panelists. So here I used all data I had from every wave.
It's 2 years later than 1 year later.
Yes, a small number. It wasn't really a large number, but we had, maybe it was because of Corona, because it was during the Corona pandemic and they were at home and we also asked some question about the Corona pandemic. I don't know, but we had more responses on the last wave, yes.
If we are at it, is this enrollment? So what ratio of these students are first and second year students? So by your second wave,
Yeah.
you have 2 enrollment periods passed, right? So that's it could be that somebody actually enrolling in the second enrollment period.
Yeah. So in the third wave, so a half year after graduation, like around a third of the student hadn't taken up any pathway. So they had this gap year, we call it gap year. So that's really a big number of students who decided 1.5 years to take up. And now there's only, I think, 15% of them in a gap year, 1.5 years. Like we call it gap year, but it's technically not a gap year anymore. Yes.
I'm just wondering that. So you've been showing like 3 times 3 regression coefficient,
Yeah.
and one of them seems to be significant at the 10% level or
Yeah.
so. And aren't you worried that this is consistent with type 1 error? So like, even if everything is random, you expect one of them to pop up as significant.
We were thinking about when we calculated regression for the secondary outcomes to do a Bonferroni correction, but we didn't this for this. So yeah, if you do a Bonferroni correction, so nothing would be significant, you're right, but we thought this is our primary outcome and it was our focus group, and we expected also, not the ministry, but I expected that when there is an effect, it will be not in the first stage, because then you look at students, they already know that they are studying, they have the grades to get in place, and I was expecting when we see an effect, then 1.5 years after, because I knew that a lot of students wait 1 year. We already knew this for Germany, like it's a third of the students.
Did you look at the differential take-up? I mean, differential take-up of gap year of the between academic and non-academic background students?
Yeah, I will show it to you later. Okay, so I would say we answered the question. Does the program enhance the transition? And we can say, okay, it's enhanced for one subgroup, and this is also the focus group. So when we showed this presentation for the ministry, they were really lucky, and we already got our money, and they were really happy that they didn't spend money for nothing. So yeah, now we come to this second question. Does the program reduce inequality in transition to higher education? And what we did here is we calculated the predicted values for each group. So the control 0 group is the control group from non-academic background, control 1 is from academic background, and then the same for the treatment group separately. So if we calculate the transition rate for the control group, we see that students with non-academic background are really less likely, really less likely to transfer to higher education. And the differences, so the inequality for this group, for the control group, are 20 percentage points. So it's really huge. And now if we look at the predicted value for the treatment group, we see a really interesting pattern, because we not only see that the differences are smaller, and it's about 15 percentage point that the program can, in average, reduces the inequality. It's also that the person with non-academic background transfer more often to university, and persons with academic background, they don't do that. So they less likely than in the control group to go to university. So because of this pattern, we ask a third question: why does the program effects only reveals 1.5 years after graduation? And what is really interesting, and I really didn't expect this, because if we look at the research in Germany, we have a lot of data, also national-wide data of students with university qualification, but they ask a half year before the graduation and a half year after graduation. And then they calculate something like the probability to go to university and see some social inequality. It's not only that they look at the transition rate, they also take students into account who has a high intention to study. And then they see social inequality in this group. And what we did here, we only looked at students, we only looked at the transition rate. And when we only look at the transition rate, we see that persons from non-academic background are more likely to go to university a half year after graduation. So we don't have inequality at this point. And this was what was really surprising for me, because I knew the research and everyone is showing me that there is inequality, but with different data. And then we have this pattern 1.5 years afterwards. It turns around, and it's also really large. Yeah, if you compare the control groups. Yeah. So you already asked how many students choose to go to the gap year and vocational training. So we didn't only look at the higher education track. Here we compared the non-academic students. Yeah, you can see it, the non-academic students a half year after graduation. And these are the differences between treatment and control groups. So the differences between treatment and control group not so high. I told you already that there's not a really large effect, but we also here see what are the differences between control and treatment group according to the vocational education track and this so-called gap year. And also for the academics. And as you can see, the academics, oh no, here you can't see, but academic students with academic background are more likely to choose a gap year. This was your question, and you can't see it here, but yeah. Yeah, and as you already know, that the transition rate of students with non-academic background is higher in the treatment group, and for students with academic background is lower. But if you see also at the vocational education training, you see that students with non-academic background are less likely to choose a vocational education training, but not so much less likely that we gain on the study or higher education track. So it's not that students decide more likely or decide more for academic track. They are in total take up any track. So it's that students with non-academic background would do nothing in the control group in comparison to the treatment group. They go more into the higher academic higher academic track. Yeah.
You didn't say anything yet about the negative effect for the academic background students on higher education. So why is that? That's 6.2.
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also looked at effect heterogeneity, and what we saw, because for politicians it's really important, but why it has a negative effect, and it should they don't want to have a negative effect for anyone. And we looked for effect heterogeneity. And what we saw is that for students with non-academic background, the students with better grades go to higher education. And for students with academic background, the students with lower grades go to vocational education training. So our argument is that the fit between skills and track more better now than before. This is our argument. Yes, there's one more question.
Might be one of the motivations of prolonging your funding, that you can look at whether the kids actually graduate from school or not, because if the fit is better, then everybody is happy because they don't drop out of school and study for nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also, okay, I just sum up everything. So the program enhanced the transition right into higher education for persons with non-academic background by 8%. Which point? It reduced inequality, as we saw in university enrollment between person with and without academic background by 15%. Which point? The politician itself loved to say by 70% percentage of the inequality, because it sounds really nice to say that, but we stay with the 15 percentage point. And what we also see is that the effect reveals only after 1.5 years. And what we learned about this is that we should look at both groups. So if we really want to answer the question, reduce, does a program reduce inequality, we should look at both groups, and we should observe them a little bit longer than usual. So there's also a good argument for politicians to say that we need this time. We have to look at the students for such a long time. Yeah, that's what we learned also from this project, and maybe also the ministry of financing us.
So you had 2 surveys, and Donny already asked, the difference in the numbers, but I'm wondering, could you see also who exactly filled the first and the second one? So to get, the very same students, because I'm just, wondering whether, especially during the pandemic, maybe the group of respondents can be very different, and therefore the results can be, biased.
Yeah. We almost replicate the same results when we just used students who participated in the 3rd and 4th phase. So nothing is changing when we only look at students where we have the information for both times, like a half year and a half year later, because this was also my question, like, well, do we have a bias? But we can't see that because the results almost the same, so almost on the points the same.
And you said you're worrying about the spillover effect, but you didn't say anything about it.
Yeah. We couldn't really control for spillover effect. What we did is to just take the group of, we had one question in the questionnaire. Do you know anyone who's participating in the talent scouting group? So, and then we just took the person who said no, or I don't know, because we thought if they don't know, maybe they don't talk about this, and so it might be not a spillover effect there. And then we calculated everything else. And for the 3rd wave, it was the same, so we couldn't see anything. For the 4th wave, it was close. There were, I think, some differences, but I think there's a problem when we do it like this, because we have a sample after the randomization, a subsample after randomization. So I wouldn't really argue that we could control for spillover effect, but if there is a spillover effect, I would say the spillover effect is a positive. So the control group have also effect. So if we look at this result, I would say it's a conservative calculation. So the effect might be higher because of the spillover effect we can't control. Because I would assume that would be a positive. So the treatment group would affect the control group and not the other way around. So I would say maybe the effect is higher. So I can't really say anything about the spillover, how big it is, but I would say it wouldn't change the assumption that the program works.
Well, I agree with you. That's probably positive of the effect. I mean that the, but aren't you worried that the effect sizes are different between the two groups, so the academic and the non-academic, and hence the actually the inequalities are not changing this way, but maybe, you know, in an extreme case that they're staying the same, but everything's moving up. So if the I'm just, you know, provoking you, but if the bias is bigger in the non-academic group, then this 70% is not 70% in fact, but it's, let's say, 80 something, and then the 20% gap remains, but everybody is more likely to go to university.
But yeah, I can't say anything about it. Yeah, you are totally right, but I can't calculate the below. It's something what maybe another project should consider. We tried to do a randomization on school level, so to control for spillover effect, but yeah, it was not possible. It was just not possible. But it's a good point. Spillover effect is something else. I didn't look at the comments in Zoom, so I didn't. Yeah, okay, because. Okay.
One more question, my last one, I promise. Is there any heterogeneity across schools? So did you see any? So you have 30 schools. So actually, you can look at in what type of schools and what sort of schools does this intervention matter more? And you know, think about that too.
Between schools, we have no significant differences. So you see a little bit more for the comprehensive schools. It is also what you would expect it, but they are not significant. Yeah. Also, in wave 2 and 3, there were no differences. So the no effect was still in both school types. It's the only thing because of the numbers of cases, it's the only thing we looked for heterogeneity according to the schools. Yeah.
Then thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting.
Yeah, thank you so much for your comments and questions and having me here.
The ministers are actually